She loses the use of her legs. Then her 68-year-old mother does the unthinkable to save her. Welcome back and enjoy the story. The world tilted sideways as Tina collapsed onto the polished hardwood floor of her own clinic. One moment, she had been demonstrating proper stretching techniques to Mrs. Henderson, a regular with persistent lower back pain. The next, her legs simply vanished beneath her, not in pain, but in a terrifying absence of sensation that spread like ice water up her spine. The expressions on her patients' faces shifted from surprise to horror as she tried and failed to stand, her trained muscles refusing every command. At 42, the accomplished physiotherapist who had built her reputation on healing others found herself sprawled helplessly before them, her professional dignity shattered in an instant that would divide her life into before and after. "I'm fine," Tina insisted, the words hollowing as she spoke them. Her assistant rushed to her side, while Mrs. Henderson called for an ambulance. The room swam in Tina's vision as panic constricted her chest. She had felt occasional numbness in her legs for weeks, but had dismissed it as exhaustion from long hours at the clinic. Now, as she lay immobile while worried voices swirled around her, a cold certainty settled in her stomach. Something was catastrophically wrong. The next 72 hours blurred into a nightmare of tests, clinical discussions, and the gradual erosion of hope. MRIs revealed inflammatory lesions along her spinal cord, the hallmarks of a rare degenerative nerve condition that had been silently advancing through her system. The neurologist's voice remained steady as he delivered the diagnosis, but Tina heard the subtext beneath his careful phrasing. Her condition would likely progress. They could attempt to slow it, but there were no guarantees. The irony wasn't lost on her, the healer who could no longer heal herself. "We'll fight this," Dr. Patterson said, sliding a folder of information across his desk. "There are treatments, clinical trials. Your medical background gives you an advantage in understanding what you're facing." Tina nodded mechanically, her physiotherapist's knowledge already calculating the implications for her mobility, her independence, her identity. Her fingers traced the edge of the wheelchair they'd provided, alien and threatening. She'd helped countless patients adjust to assistive devices, celebrated their progress from wheelchairs to walkers to canes. Now she faced her own progression, in reverse. "Should I call someone for you?" the nurse asked as they finalized her discharge paperwork. "Family? A partner?" Tina hesitated. Divorced for 6 years, she'd prided herself on her self-sufficiency, on the life she'd built for herself and her 17-year-old daughter Chrissa. The thought of leaning on others made her chest tighten with resistance. But as she stared at the wheelchair that would carry her home, reality crashed through her defenses. "My mother," she finally said, her voice cracking on the admission of need. "Call my mother." Ursula Pereira arrived at the hospital 3 hours later, bursting through the doors with the determined energy that had defined her 40-year nursing career. At 68, with silver threading through her dark hair and arthritis gnarling her once nimble fingers, she nonetheless commanded the room with a presence that made the attending nurses straighten their posture. "Feel her," she said simply, using the Portuguese endearment for daughter as she took in the sight of Tina in the wheelchair. She didn't gasp or cry. Instead, she squared her shoulders and nodded once, as if accepting a mission. "We go home now. I take care of everything." Those 7 words, "I take care of everything," sent simultaneous waves of relief and dread through Tina's body. Her relationship with her mother had always been complicated, love tangled with resentment, respect with frustration. Ursula's old-world Portuguese values of family duty had often clashed with Tina's fierce American independence. Now, as Tina faced the most profound vulnerability of her adult life, those tensions would be forced into the open with nowhere to hide. As they left the hospital, Tina noticed how her mother's hands trembled slightly as she gripped the wheelchair handles, betraying the arthritis she typically refused to acknowledge. The sunset painted ocean views familiar streets in deceptive warmth as they headed toward the small coastal town where everyone knew everyone's business. By morning, the news would spread through the community like wildfire. The physiotherapist who helped countless neighbors recover their mobility now couldn't walk down her own hallway. "Chrissa doesn't know yet," Tina said as they approached her modest craftsman house near the town center. "I didn't want to tell her over the phone." "The girl is strong, like you," Ursula replied, her Portuguese accent thickening as it always did when emotions ran high. "She has her grandmother's heart, too. She will handle." As the car pulled into the driveway, Tina glimpsed her reflection. In the window, her dark hair disheveled, her typically animated face drawn with exhaustion. For a moment, she hardly recognized herself. The woman who had begun that morning confidently treating patients now returned home a patient herself, with a prognosis that threatened everything she had built. Inside the house, Chris's backpack lay tossed on the couch, textbooks spilling onto the floor, signs of normal teenage life that now seemed to belong to another dimension. Tina heard water running upstairs and took a deep breath, gathering what remained of her strength for the conversation ahead. "Mom!" Chrissa called, her footsteps pattering down the stairs. "Did you bring dinner?" "I was thinking we could." Her voice trailed off as she rounded the corner and saw the wheelchair, her grandmother, and finally the defeated posture of her mother, the woman who had always stood tall against every challenge. "What happened?" Chrissa whispered, her voice small and frightened, in a way it hadn't been since childhood. Tina forced a smile, deploying the protective shield of humor she always used when emotions threatened to overwhelm her. "Turns out even physical therapists can't ignore their own body's warning signs. I should really leave a 1-star review for myself." The joke fell flat in the heavy air between them. Chrissa's eyes, so like Tina's own, filled with confused tears, as Ursula stepped forward to embrace her granddaughter. "Your mother is sick," Ursula explained, her voice gentle but matter-of-fact. "Her legs, they don't work right now. The doctors, they are working to help her, and now I am here to help too. We will face this together, as family." As Chrissa collapsed into her grandmother's arms, Tina watched from her wheelchair. Suddenly, an observer to her own life. Her mother's presence, which had always seemed overwhelming in the past, now appeared as a necessary anchor in waters that threatened to sweep them all away. But as Ursula's gaze met hers over Chris's head, an unspoken agreement passed between them. This arrangement was temporary. Tina would recover. She would reclaim her independence. She had to. What neither woman could possibly know in that moment was how the next 18 months would transform them both, challenging everything they thought they knew about strength, healing, and the complicated bonds between mothers and daughters. That night, after Chrissa finally fell asleep, Tina sat in her bedroom, staring at the medical equipment that had been delivered with clinical efficiency. The walker, the raised toilet seat, the shower chair, each item a sterile reminder of what was happening to her body. When a soft knock came at her door, she quickly wiped away her tears. "Enter," she called, her professional voice intact even as her world crumbled. Ursula stepped in, carrying a steaming mug that filled the room with the pungent aroma of herbs. "My mother's tea," she explained, setting it on the nightstand. "For inflammation." Tina eyed the murky liquid skeptically. "Mom, I have prescribed medications, evidence-based treatments, and you will take them," Ursula agreed with a nod. "But these herbs, they have helped our family for generations. What harm in trying both?" Too exhausted to argue, Tina accepted the mug, the warm ceramic, steadying her trembling hands. As the bitter liquid slid down her throat, she found herself transported to childhood illnesses when this same tea had appeared at her bedside, her mother's calloused hands cool against her fevered forehead. I'm only staying temporarily, Ursula said, settling into the chair beside the bed. Just until you adjust. Both women recognized the lie for what it was, but neither challenged it. Instead, they sat in rare, peaceful silence as the moon cast long shadows across the bedroom floor. You should sleep now, Ursula finally said, standing with a slight wince that betrayed her own physical discomfort. Mom, Tina called as her mother reached the door. Thank you for coming. Ursula paused, her silhouette framed in the doorway. Where else would I be, Phila? Where else would I be? As her mother's footsteps receded down the hallway, Tina allowed the tears to come freely for her lost mobility, for her uncertain future, for her daughter who would now see her vulnerability instead of her strength, and perhaps most surprisingly, for the complicated gratitude she felt toward her mother, whose presence she had so often resisted but now desperately needed. The next morning arrived with painful brightness, reality crashing back as Tina attempted to get out of bed independently. Her legs, once strong and reliable from years of demonstrating therapeutic exercises, now betrayed her with their weakness. By the time she managed to transfer herself to the wheelchair, sweat beaded her forehead and frustration burned in her chest. She wheeled into the kitchen to find Ursula already cooking, the counters lined with ingredients for traditional Portuguese dishes that had filled Tina's childhood home with comforting aromas. Chrissa sat at the table, her school uniform slightly rumpled, eyes red-rimmed from crying. "Good morning," Tina said with forced cheerfulness. "Everyone sleep okay?" The absurd normality of the question hung in the air as Ursula placed a plate of food before her, far more than Tina could eat, but the offering of nourishment was her mother's love language. "I called your clinic," Ursula announced, her back to Tina as she returned to the stove. "Told them you need 2 weeks at minimum. That assistant, Jenny, she will reschedule patients." Tina's fork clattered against her plate. "You did." "What, Mom? You can't just take over my business decisions. Those patients rely on me. The clinic is already understaffed and—" "And what?" Ursula interrupted, turning with spatula in hand. "You will drag yourself there today? Show them how to heal while you cannot stand? Use your head, Valentina. You are the smart one, always. Think like doctor now, not like patient." The use of her full name stung, as did the harsh truth of her mother's words. Tina glanced at Chrissa, who stared at her plate, clearly uncomfortable with the tension crackling between the adults. "I have to get to school," Chrissa mumbled, grabbing her backpack. She hesitated beside Tina's wheelchair, awkwardly leaning down for a quick hug before rushing out the door. The silence left in her wake was deafening. "She's scared," Tina said quietly. "I need to be strong for her." Ursula snorted, a sound somehow both dismissive and affectionate. Strong does not mean pretending. Strong means facing what is real. She pulled out a chair, sitting directly across from Tina, with the directness that had intimidated doctors throughout her nursing career. "Now, we make plan, real plan, not fantasy." For the next hour, they constructed a schedule of medical appointments, therapeutic exercises, and clinic check-ins that acknowledged Tina's limitations while preserving what autonomy she could maintain. With each item they discussed, Tina felt the walls of her new reality closing in, but also, reluctantly, the steadying influence of her mother's practical approach. "The spare room is too small for me," Ursula declared as they finished. "I will take the couch. Mom, your back is not your concern." Ursula cut her off. "Now, we begin with exercises. The doctor says you must maintain what strength remains." In her decades as a physiotherapist, Tina had guided countless patients through rehabilitative exercises, offering encouragement through their pain and frustration. Now, as her mother helped position her on the living room floor, Tina found herself on the receiving end of firm instructions and adjustments. "Straighten more," Ursula commanded, her nurse's hands surprisingly gentle as they guided Tina's leg through range of motion exercises. "Feel the stretch. Hold." Tina bit back a sharp retort, forcing herself to breathe through the discomfort. "I know how to do this, Mom. It's literally my profession." "Then why your face is so tight? Breathe deeper. You tell your patients this, yes? Now follow your own wisdom." The morning crawled by in a series of small humiliations as Ursula helped with exercises, medication management, and finally, most mortifyingly, a shower that required her mother's assistance to safely navigate. By noon, Tina was exhausted, both physically and emotionally, retreating to her bedroom under the guise of needing rest. Alone, she pulled her laptop close and began researching her condition more thoroughly, bypassing the simplified patient literature in favor of medical journal articles. The statistics and case studies painted a bleak picture that the neurologist had softened in his delivery. Most patients with her condition experienced progressive deterioration. Only a small percentage maintained their baseline function. Even fewer improved. Tina closed the laptop, pressing the heels of her hands against, her eyes to stop the threatening tears. She had built her entire identity around physical capability, first as a collegiate swimmer, then as a physiotherapist, whose skilled hands and demonstrative teaching helped others recover their movement. Who was she, if not that person? Oh. Knock at the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Telephone," Ursula announced, holding out Tina's cell phone. "Your friend Lisa. I told her you rest, but she insists." Lisa Henderson, fellow physiotherapist and Tina's closest friend since college, had a voice that immediately broke through Tina's professional composure. "Jesus, T, why did I have to hear about this from reception? What the hell happened?" The concern in Lisa's voice cracked something in Tina's chest, and words poured out, medical details interspersed with raw fear in a way she couldn't express to her mother or daughter. Lisa listened without interruption until Tina finally ran out of words. "I'm coming over tonight," Lisa said, no room for argument in her tone. "And I'm bringing the good wine, the expensive stuff I save for actual catastrophes. Not a good idea," Tina replied, eyeing the medications lined up on her nightstand. "Also, my mother, the former nurse, would probably tackle you at the door." "Fine, then I'm bringing work files. The Murphy case is giving me fits, and I need your brain. Consider it a consultation." Tina recognized the transparent attempt to make her feel useful, and surprisingly, gratitude washed through her instead of resentment. "Bring the Murphy file, and maybe some of that dark chocolate with sea salt." After hanging up, Tina noticed Ursula lingering in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Your friend, she is good to you," her mother observed. "You will need your people now." "I know," Tina acknowledged, though the admission felt like surrender. Throughout her adult life, she had prided herself on being the support system, not requiring one. Now, as the borders of her independence contracted, she would have to redraw the maps of her relationships. By evening, news of Tina's condition had spread through Ocean View's tight-knit community. Her front porch accumulated casserole dishes and flower arrangements, each delivery accompanied by concerned neighbors who spoke in hushed tones as if in a sick room. Ursula fielded most visitors with efficient gratitude, sparing Tina the exhaustion of explaining her condition repeatedly. When Lisa arrived with chocolate and patient files as promised, she breezed past Ursula with the familiarity of 2 decades of friendship, plopping down on Tina's bed as if nothing had changed. "The Murphy case is making me crazy," she announced, spreading files across the comforter. "His left shoulder has this weird catch that doesn't match the imaging." For 2 blissful hours, Tina immersed herself in the familiar world of therapeutic assessment, her diagnostic mind sharp even as her body failed her. When they finally closed the file, Lisa reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. The clinic will manage, but it's not the same without you, she said. Take the time you need, but know your chair is waiting. We'll figure out accommodations, whatever you need. The offer, so genuine, so assuming of eventual return, lodged in Tina's throat. She couldn't bring herself to share the statistics. She had read that afternoon, the likelihood that she might never regain enough function to demonstrate techniques again. Thanks, she managed, squeezing Lisa's hand in return. I'm not going anywhere. This is temporary. After Lisa left, Tina found herself alone with the weight of that lie. She wheeled herself to the living room where Ursula sat knitting, the click of needles a rhythmic counterpoint to the soft Portuguese music playing from her old CD player. Your friend, she thinks you will go back soon, Ursula observed without looking up from her work. You did not tell her the truth. I didn't. Lie, Tina countered, defensive. We don't know how I'll respond to treatment. Ursula's needles paused. Hope is good. Denial is dangerous. There is difference. I'm not in denial, Tina snapped, her patience fraying. I'm being realistic. Some patients maintain function or even improve. I'm otherwise healthy. I'm compliant with treatment. I have medical knowledge, and this makes you special. Ursula's dark eyes, so like Tina's own, fixed on her with uncomfortable directness. This disease, it cares about these things? The bluntness of the question hit Tina like a physical blow. Of course, her condition didn't care about her credentials or determination. Diseases weren't sentient entities to be reasoned with or impressed. They were biological processes, indifferent to human will. I need to believe I can beat this, Tina whispered, the admission painful in its vulnerability. Ursula's expression softened as she set aside her knitting and crossed to where Tina sat in her wheelchair. With arthritic hands that must have caused her pain, she cupped Tina's face as she had when Tina was a child with fever. Then believe, feel her, but also prepare. Both can be true. As Tina leaned into her mother's touch, something shifted between them, not a resolution to their fundamental differences, but perhaps the beginning of a bridge across them. That night, as the house settled into silence, Tina lay awake listening to her mother's soft snores from the living room sofa. The day's emotional whiplash left her exhausted but restless, her mind racing with unanswerable questions about her future. Would she walk unassisted again? Could she return to her practice? How would she support Chrissa through college without her full income? From the bedside table, her phone illuminated with a text from Chrissa. You awake? Seconds later, her bedroom door creaked open and her daughter slipped inside, looking younger than her 17 years in oversized pajamas, her face pale in the moonlight. Can't sleep? Tina asked, patting the edge of the bed. Chrissa curled beside her mother with the same instinctive movement she'd had as a child, seeking comfort after nightmares. Is Grandma going to stay forever? She whispered, the question holding layers of complexity that Tina couldn't begin to unpack at this hour. Not forever, Tina assured her, stroking her daughter's hair, just until things stabilize. She made me drink this gross tea after school, said it would strengthen my immunity. It tasted like dirt and tree bark. A laugh bubbled up from Tina's chest, unexpected and healing. Welcome to my entire childhood. Consider yourself officially inducted into Portuguese home remedies. They giggled together in the darkness, the sound fragile but genuine. The first laughter in this new reality. As their amusement faded, Chris's hand found Tina's beneath the covers. Are you scared, Mom? She asked, the directness of adolescence cutting through pretense. Tina considered deflecting, protecting her daughter with reassurances. But something, in Chris's tone, the adult beneath the child, demanded honesty. Yes, Tina admitted, the word barely audible. I'm terrified. Chris's grip tightened. Me too. After a pause, she added, but Grandma isn't. She's like scary confident. It's kind of annoying. Another laugh, slightly stronger. That's a perfect description of your grandmother. Scary confident. She's been that way my whole life. Was she always this much? Oh, honey, you're seeing the mellowed version. Imagine this intensity while working night shifts as an ER nurse and raising me alone after my father died. She's a force of nature with orthopedic nursing shoes. They talked until Chris's responses grew sleepy, her body relaxing into the beginning of sleep. As her daughter's breathing deepened, Tina realized they had spoken more openly in these few minutes than they had in months of their previously busy parallel lives. Perhaps this forced slowdown, this terrible new reality, might offer unexpected gifts amid the losses. As Chrissa finally drifted off, Tina sent up a silent prayer. To whatever might be listening, let me stay in her life long enough. Let me see the woman she becomes. If you are enjoying the story, type 5 in the comments and subscribe for more videos like this. If not, type 0. It helps me create even better content for you. Continuing. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of medical appointments, therapeutic exercises, and the gradual establishment of new routines. Tina's small house, once a peaceful retreat from her busy clinic, now felt overcrowded with medical equipment, her mother's constant presence, and the weight of unspoken worries. "You need proper evaluation," Ursula declared one morning as she watched Tina struggle through her exercises, frustration evident in every labored movement. "This Dr. Patterson, he's good but not specialist enough. We need someone who understands this condition specifically." Tina gritted her teeth through a particularly difficult stretch. "Mom, Dr. Patterson is the best neurologist within 50 miles. And in case you haven't noticed, travel isn't exactly easy for me right now." "Then we make it easier," Ursula replied with characteristic directness. "I call my friend Elena. Remember her? The one who worked at Boston Medical Center for 30 years? She knows people. We find the right doctor, even if we must travel." The suggestion awakened Tina's hope, though she tried to temper it with medical realism. "Specialists have waiting lists, Mom, sometimes months long." Ursula merely smiled, a knowing expression that Tina recognized from childhood, the look that meant obstacles were merely details to be managed. "Let me worry about waiting lists." True to her word, 3 days later, Ursula triumphantly announced she had secured an appointment with Dr. Elaine Chen, a leading researcher in neurodegenerative conditions at a prestigious medical center in Boston. The appointment was in 2 weeks, a timeline that would have seemed impossible without Ursula's networking through former nursing colleagues. "We go together," Ursula declared, brooking no argument. "Chrissa stays with Lisa while we are gone, 2 days only." The prospect of traveling with her illness filled Tina with dread, but beneath that anxiety sparked a tiny flame of hope. Perhaps this specialist would see something others had missed. Perhaps there were treatment options she hadn't considered. When the day of departure arrived, Tina found herself being efficiently packed into the passenger seat of her own car, which Ursula had adapted with cushions and supports to make the 3-hour drive to Boston more manageable. "You have your medications?" Ursula asked for the 3rd time that morning, "and the referral paperwork?" "Yes, Mom," Tina sighed, feeling like a child again despite approaching her 43rd birthday. "Everything's packed. Chrissa has the emergency. Contacts. We've gone through the checklist twice." Ursula nodded, satisfied, and slid into the driver's seat with a slight wince that betrayed her arthritis. Tina noticed, but said nothing, recognizing the futility of suggesting her mother's discomfort might matter as much as her own. As they pulled away from Ocean View, the familiar coastline receding in the side mirror, Tina realized this was her first time leaving town since her diagnosis. The world beyond her small community suddenly seemed vast and threatening, full of unpredictable challenges for someone with her mobility issues. "We should have arranged for a medical transport," she fretted as they merged onto the highway. "What if I need assistance en route? What if What if the sky falls? Ursula interrupted, her tone somehow both impatient and affectionate. Always you worry about what might happen instead of handling what is happening. We drive to Boston. If problems come, we solve them when they come. The simple practicality of her mother's approach momentarily silenced Tina's anxieties. They drove in companionable quiet for nearly an hour, the radio playing softly between them, until Ursula unexpectedly broke the silence. "I was afraid too when your father died," she said, eyes fixed on the road ahead. "You were just 7. I thought, how will I raise this child alone? How will I work and be mother both? Every day I woke up afraid." Martina turned toward her mother, surprised by the rare reference to her father and the even rarer admission of fear. Ursula Pereira had always presented herself as unshakable, a foundation that could weather any storm. "I didn't know that," Tina said softly. "You never seemed afraid." Ursula's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "What good would it do for you to see my fear? You needed my strength then." She glanced briefly at Tina. "Just as your Chrissa needs your strength now." The parallel wasn't lost on Tina, who had been struggling to balance honesty with her daughter against the desire to protect her from the full weight of uncertainty. "But last week you told me not to pretend. You said strength means facing what's real." A small smile tugged at Ursula's lips. "Ah, you listen sometimes. Good." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "There is difference between hiding your fear and being controlled by it. I never pretended to you that life was perfect after your father died, but I showed you that fear does not stop us from living." Nacy. As Boston's skyline appeared on the horizon, Tina considered her mother's words. Perhaps there was wisdom in Ursula's approach, not denying reality, but refusing to be defined by its limitations. It was a perspective Tina had often shared with her patients, but struggled to apply to herself. Dr. Chen's office occupied the 14th floor of a sleek medical building in downtown Boston. The waiting room buzzed with activity, patients in various stages of mobility challenges, caregivers filling out paperwork, medical staff moving efficiently between examination rooms. Tina felt simultaneously at home in this clinical environment and alienated by her position on the patient side of the equation. "Valentina Pereira?" A nurse appeared with a tablet, smiling professionally. "Dr. Chen is ready for you." As Ursula began to rise from her seat, the nurse added gently, "The doctor prefers to speak with patients alone, initially. Family will be invited in shortly." Tina expected her mother to protest, to assert her right to be involved as both family and a medical professional. Instead, Ursula simply nodded and reached for a magazine. "I wait here. You tell doctor everything, not just what you think is important. Everything." The examination that followed was the most thorough Tina had experienced since her diagnosis. Dr. Chen, a petite woman with an intense focus that belied her soft-spoken manner, spent nearly an hour testing reflexes, muscle responses, and sensory perceptions before even opening Tina's file. "Your original diagnosis is correct," she confirmed, finally reviewing the records Tina had brought. "But I'm concerned about the treatment protocol. The standard approach isn't aggressive enough for your particular presentation." Hope and fear tangled in Tina's chest. "What does that mean?" Dr. Chen pulled her chair closer, meeting Tina's eyes directly. "It means we have options, but they come with trade-offs. There's a new combination therapy showing promising results in cases like yours, but it involves more intensive treatment. Infusions 3 times weekly for the first month, then tapering to weekly maintenance." "And the success rate?" Tina asked the physiotherapist in her needing statistical context. 37% of patients show significant improvement in mobility. Another 40% stabilize without further deterioration. The remaining 23% continue to progress despite treatment. Better odds than her current trajectory, but far from a guarantee. Side effects? Substantial, Dr. Chen admitted. Fatigue, potential immune suppression, possible. Liver impacts that require monitoring. It's not an easy protocol, Ms. Pereira, but given your age and otherwise excellent health, you're an ideal candidate. When Ursula was finally invited into the consultation, she absorbed Dr. Chen's explanation with the focused attention of a professional evaluating a treatment plan. She asked pointed questions about monitoring protocols, potential complications, and long-term outcomes, inquiries that reflected her decades of nursing experience. "You were a nurse?" Dr. Chen asked, clearly impressed by Ursula's medical knowledge. 43 years, Ursula confirmed. Emergency and orthopedics. "Then you understand the challenges. This treatment requires consistent support and monitoring. Ms. Pereira will need assistance, especially during the initial phase. She has me," Ursula stated simply, as if that settled every concern. "We start when?" The drive back to Ocean View carried a different energy. The temporary lifting that comes with having a plan, however uncertain its outcome. Tina clutched the folder of information Dr. Chen had provided, already mentally reorganizing her life around the treatment schedule that would begin the following week. "We must tell Chrissa everything," Ursula said as they neared home. "No protecting her from truth. She's old enough to understand." Tina nodded, recognizing the wisdom in this approach. "I'll talk to her tonight, alone, if that's okay." "Of course." Ursula reached across the console to briefly touch Tina's hand. "You are still her mother. I am just backup." The term, so utilitarian, so lacking in the emotional complications of their actual relationship, startled a laugh from Tina. "Backup? Is that what we're calling this arrangement?" Ursula shrugged, a small smile playing at her lips. "What would you call it?" Tina considered the question seriously. What was this shifting, evolving dynamic between them? Not quite role, reversal, not quite partnership, but something new being forged in the crucible of necessity. "I don't know," she admitted finally. "I don't think there's a word for what this is." Ursula nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. "Then we make it up as we go." That evening, after Ursula tactfully made herself scarce, Tina sat with Chrissa in the backyard garden that had once been her weekend passion. The autumn flowers were fading, many beds already turned for winter under Ursula's careful tending during the weeks Tina had been unable to manage them. "So basically you'll be super sick from the treatment that might make you better?" Chrissa summarized, after Tina explained Dr. Chen's plan. Her tone was carefully neutral, but her fingers twisted anxiously in the hem of her sweater. "That's about the size of it," Tina confirmed. "It's going to be rough for a while, but there's real hope this could slow or even reverse some of the damage." Chrissa picked at a loose thread, not meeting her mother's eyes. "Does this mean Grandma's staying even longer?" The question carried layers of meaning Tina couldn't fully decipher. Was Chrissa bothered by her grandmother's presence? Relieved? By it? Worried about what it signified about Tina's condition? "Yes, she'll need to stay through the initial treatment phase at least," Tina said carefully. "Is that okay with you?" Chrissa shrugged, her expression still unreadable. "It's whatever. She's intense, but—" She hesitated, then added quietly, "She makes me feel safe, like nothing bad will happen if she's around." The admission created a complicated ache in Tina's chest. Gratitude that her daughter felt protected, sorrow that she couldn't provide that security herself anymore. "Your grandmother has that effect on people. When I was your age, I found it suffocating. Now I'm starting to see it differently." "You guys fight a lot," Chrissa observed, "but not like you're mad at each other. more like you're speaking different languages." The insight, so astute from her teenage daughter, stopped Tina short. "That's remarkably accurate. We've always approached life from opposite directions." "But you end up in the same place sometimes," Chrissa said, finally looking up with a slight smile. "Like when Grandma made you drink that gross tea and you pretended it was awful, but I saw you asking for a second cup later." Caught in this small hypocrisy, Tina laughed, a genuine sound that felt like the first crack in the ice that had frozen around her heart since the diagnosis. "Busted. The tea's still disgusting, but my inflammation does feel marginally better when I drink it." Chris's smile widened. "See? Different roads. Same place." She hesitated, then asked the question Tina had been dreading. "Mom? What happens if the treatment doesn't work?" The weight of that possibility settled between them, autumn leaves rustling overhead in the gentle coastal breeze. Tina had always been honest with her daughter, believing that children deserved the dignity of truth, even when difficult. Now, facing the most challenging truth of her life, she fought the urge to offer false reassurances. "If it doesn't work," she said carefully, "we adjust. We find a new normal. I'll still be your mom, just a mom who moves differently." She reached for Chris's hand. "But we're not there yet. Right now, we focus on giving this treatment every chance to succeed." Chrissa nodded, squeezing her mother's fingers. "I've been researching online. There are lots of adaptive techniques for people with mobility issues. Maybe I could help you figure some out." The offer, so practical, so thoughtful, brought unexpected tears to Tina's eyes. Her daughter was growing up, developing the problem-solving resilience that would carry her through life's inevitable challenges. "I'd like that," Tina managed, blinking away the moisture. "Your grandmother might have a few ideas too. She's surprisingly inventive when necessity demands it." As if summoned by her name, Ursula appeared at the back door. "Dinner is ready," she called. "Chrissa, come set table." As Chrissa rose to comply, she paused to kiss Tina's forehead, a gesture of surprising maturity. "We got this, Mom," she whispered, echoing the phrase Tina had so often used when Chrissa faced difficult tests or social challenges. Different road, same place. The treatment protocol began the following Monday at Ocean View Regional Hospital. Dr. Chen had coordinated with local providers to administer the infusions, sparing Tina the exhaustion of traveling to Boston 3 times weekly. The first session lasted 4 hours, during which Ursula remained steadfastly in the uncomfortable visitor's chair, alternating between knitting and sharing increasingly elaborate stories about her nursing days to distract Tina from the discomfort. And then this man, this very important businessman with the expensive suit, he faints right in middle of emergency room. "All because I am drawing blood from other patient," Ursula recounted, her accent thickening with amusement. "So now I have 2 patients instead of 1. Tina smiled weakly, fighting the nausea that had begun as the medication entered her system. "Mom, maybe a less medical story right now?" Ursula paused, reading the signs of distress in her daughter's pallor. Without comment, she set aside her knitting and moved closer, her cool hand finding Tina's forehead in a gesture unchanged since childhood. "Close eyes," she instructed softly. "I tell you about the summer in Azores, when I was girl before coming to America, about the blue hydrangeas that grew taller than houses and the way the ocean looked from my grandmother's window." Her voice continued, painting pictures of a world Tina had never seen but had heard about throughout her childhood. The volcanic islands where the Pereira family had lived for generations before Ursula's immigration. The rhythm of her mother's words, the familiar Portuguese names of places and people, created a cocoon of comfort that carried Tina through the worst of the side effects. By the time they returned home, however, the full impact of the treatment hit with brutal force. Tina barely made it to the bathroom before vomiting, her body rebelling against the powerful medications now circulating through her system. For the next 12 hours, she alternated between nausea, bone-deep fatigue, and miserable alertness, unable to sleep despite her exhaustion. Through it all, Ursula attended with the quiet efficiency of a seasoned nurse, providing anti-nausea medications, cool compresses, and small sips of water with ginger. She maintained a professional demeanor until well past midnight, when she thought Tina had finally drifted off. "Senhora de Fatima," Tina heard her mother whisper in Portuguese, the prayer familiar from childhood crises. "Watch over my daughter. Give her strength for this fight." The vulnerability in her mother's voice, the rare admission of worry, touched something deep in Tina's chest. This fierce woman, who faced every challenge with practical determination, was, in her private moments, just as frightened as Tina herself. The realization created an unexpected bond between them, fellow travelers in uncertainty, each trying to be strong for the other. The pattern established itself over the following weeks: treatment days marked by misery, recovery days when Tina gradually regained enough strength to maintain some semblance of normal life, then the cycle beginning again. Through it all, Ursula maintained the household with relentless efficiency, cooking traditional Portuguese comfort foods, managing Tina's increasingly complex medication schedule, and somehow still finding time to help Chrissa with college application essays. But even Ursula's seemingly inexhaustible energy had limits. One morning, as she prepared to drive Tina to her infusion appointment, Tina noticed her mother's hands trembling more severely than usual as she collected her car keys. "Mum," Tina said carefully, "when was the last time you saw a doctor about your arthritis?" Ursula dismissed the question with a wave. "Is nothing. Old hands, they shake sometimes." "Those old hands are driving me to a hospital for intravenous medication. I'd prefer they be steady on the wheel." The attempt at humor fell flat as Ursula's expression hardened. "Always you worry about wrong things. My hands work fine. 40 years of nursing with these hands, they know what to do." "That's precisely my point," Tina pressed. 40 years of physical labor. You need to take care of yourself too. Later, Ursula said firmly, ending the discussion, after you are better. The exchange highlighted a fundamental truth that Tina had always known but never fully appreciated. Her mother was constitutionally incapable of prioritizing her own needs. It was both her greatest strength and most dangerous blind spot, a quality Tina recognized in herself with uncomfortable clarity. At the clinic that day, Dr. Patterson conducted a neurological evaluation to assess the treatment's early effects.
His expression remains prominently he says Tina's reflex. Her left leg showed marginally improved response to caution.
Making notes in her file. But there are some encouraging signs here. How are you tolerating the side effects? About as well as expected, Tina replied, not mentioning the nights spent in miserable wakefulness or the days when even speaking required more energy than she possessed. Dr. Patterson glanced at Ursula, who stood guardian-like in the corner of the examination room. And you? How are you holding up as caregiver? The question seemed to startle Ursula, as if the concept of her well-being was irrelevant to the medical discussion. I am fine, she stated flatly. My daughter is the patient. Caregivers need care too, the doctor noted gently. There are support groups at the hospital, resources we can connect you with. Support groups, Ursula repeated with thinly veiled disdain. For doing what family should do? No. Save resources for those who need. On the drive home, Tina broached the subject again. Dr. Patterson was right, Mom. Caregiver burnout is real. I see it in my practice all the time. I'm not burned out, Ursula insisted, eyes fixed on the road ahead. Americans always need to talk, talk, talk. Portuguese women, we handle things. Even Portuguese women have limits, Tina said, studying her mother's profile. The proud chin, the deep lines etched around her eyes from decades of night shifts and worry. You're pushing 69, managing a house, caring for me through brutal treatments, helping Chrissa with college applications. When do you rest? When work is done, Ursula replied simply, as if stating an obvious truth. After a moment she added more softly, I rest when you are sleeping. I sit in garden. I pray. Is enough. The answer encapsulated her mother's entire life philosophy. Duty first. Personal needs addressed in whatever small spaces remained. It was an approach Ursula had tried to instill in Tina throughout her childhood, often creating friction between them as Tina developed her more individualistic American identity. As they neared home, Ursula unexpectedly pulled into the parking lot of Ocean View's small public beach, a detour from their usual route. What are we doing? Tina asked, confused by the deviation from routine. Without answering, Ursula exited the car and came around to the passenger side, opening the door and efficiently helping Tina into her wheelchair. With determined steps, she pushed the chair toward the wooden boardwalk that ran along the beach's edge. "Mom, I have to lie down," Tina protested, fatigue weighing her limbs. "The treatment." "The ocean is best medicine," Ursula interrupted, continuing her steady pace toward the water. "Better than any support group." The October air carried a brisk salt tang, the approaching winter evident in the greyish tones of the afternoon light. Few people ventured on the beach this time of year, especially midweek, leaving the expansive shoreline nearly deserted. Ursula positioned Tina's wheelchair at the boardwalk's edge, where it offered the best view of the rolling Atlantic. For several minutes, they sat in silence, watching the hypnotic rhythm of waves breaking against the shore. Despite her fatigue, Tina felt something inside her expand in the presence of this vast, ancient power, a reminder that her struggles, however all-consuming they felt, were but tiny moments in time's greater flow. "Your father proposed to end me here," Ursula said suddenly, the unexpected personal revelation startling Tina from her reverie. "Right there by those rocks. He was so nervous he dropped the ring in sand. We spent an hour looking for it, laughing like children." Tina turned to study her mother's face, softened now by memory. "You never told me that." Ursula shrugged slightly. "Many things I do not tell. Doesn't mean they aren't important." She gestured toward the horizon. "When your father died, I come here every day for months, just to sit, to breathe. The ocean." She listens without requiring words. The insight into her mother's grief process, so different from the practical, emotion-avoiding approach Tina had observed as a child, shifted something in her understanding. Perhaps Ursula's apparent stoicism hadn't been emotional repression, but simply a different way of processing, private, elemental, connected to deeper currents than verbal expression could reach. "I never knew," Tina admitted softly. "You were child," Ursula replied without judgment. "Children see what is in front of them. Now you are not child, so you see more." They remained at the ocean's edge until the sun began to set, the shared silence more healing than any conversation could have been. When they finally returned home, Tina felt exhausted but somehow lighter, as if the vastness of the ocean had put her struggles into perspective, rendering them more manageable simply by comparison with eternity. That night, as Ursula helped her prepare for bed, Tina noticed her mother wincing as she bent to retrieve a fallen slipper, a small but telling sign of physical discomfort. "Mom," Tina said, keeping her tone casual, "I think I'd like to try adding some of your traditional remedies to my treatment plan." Ursula's eyebrows rose in surprise. Now you want old country medicine, after all those years of evidence-based practice only? Let's call it an integrated approach, Tina replied with a slight smile. Dr. Chen said, there's growing research supporting some traditional anti-inflammatory compounds, but I'd need someone with experience to prepare them properly. The transparent attempt to appeal to her mother's expertise wasn't lost on Ursula, who gave Tina a knowing look. This is your way of making me sit down for a few minutes each day, to rest while making teas. Caught in her strategy, Tina shrugged. Maybe, or maybe I'm finally admitting there might be wisdom in approaches outside my medical training. Ursula considered this, her expression skeptical but not dismissive. Tomorrow I show you the teas, the compresses, but you must follow exactly. No American shortcuts. Deal, Tina agreed, relieved to have found a way to slow her mother's relentless pace, even if only briefly. As October deepened toward November, a new rhythm established itself in the household. Treatment days remained brutally difficult, but Ursula's herbal remedies, particularly a bitter tea made from specific proportions of turmeric, ginger and herbs Tina couldn't identify, seemed to ease the inflammatory response that exacerbated her symptoms. More importantly, the preparation of these traditional medicines created small islands of calm in which Ursula was forced to sit, to measure carefully, to be present rather than constantly in motion. The integration of conventional and traditional approaches marked a symbolic truce between their different worldviews, not a surrender from either side, but a recognition that neither possessed the complete answer. This compromise extended beyond medicine into other aspects of their relationship, creating space for mutual respect where judgment had often dominated. One unexpectedly warm afternoon, as Tina sat in the garden watching her mother harvest the last of the season's herbs, her phone rang with a call from her clinic. "We have a situation," Jenny, her assistant manager, explained without preamble. "Brian Anderson is threatening to take his entire family business elsewhere if you don't personally evaluate his father's rehabilitation program." The Anderson family owned Ocean View's largest fishing fleet, making them significant clients whose entire crew received treatment at Tina's practice. The senior Anderson had recently undergone knee replacement surgery, and Tina had been personally overseeing his therapy before her diagnosis. "Jenny, I can't. I'm not even cleared to practice right now, let alone demonstrate techniques." Tina glanced down at her legs, which had shown marginal improvement but remained frightfully unreliable. "I know, but he's not hearing it. He says if you're well enough to consult on the Murphy case, which apparently Lisa mentioned to him, you're well enough to see his father." The mention of the Murphy consultation with Lisa sent a spike of anxiety through Tina. She had continued reviewing complex cases from home, preserving this small connection to her professional identity, but had asked Lisa to be discreet about these informal consultations. "Tell Mr. Anderson I'll call him personally," Tina finally said, already dreading the conversation. After ending the call, she wheeled herself back inside to find Ursula watching her with concern. "Trouble at clinic?" Tina explained the situation, tension evident in her voice. "I built that practice from nothing. 13 years of 60-hour weeks, reinvesting every cent of profit into better equipment, continuing education for my staff. And now it could start unraveling because I can't physically be there." Instead of offering platitudes, Ursula sat across from Tina with uncharacteristic stillness. "What would you tell patient in your situation? About their work?" The question cut through Tina's anxiety, forcing her to apply her professional wisdom to herself. "I'd tell them that their value isn't dependent on their physical capability, that they need to prioritize recovery, that adaptations can be made." "So you have answer already," Ursula observed. "Question is whether you believe your own advice." The simple truth of this statement silenced Tina's protests. She had spent her career helping patients adjust to new physical realities, encouraging them to find alternate paths to meaningful work and life. Now faced with that same challenge, she was resisting the very wisdom she had so confidently dispensed. "I need to see the clinic," she decided suddenly. "Not to work, just to assess the situation, to start thinking about adaptations." Ursula studied her daughter's face, searching for hidden motives. "This is not about pushing too soon, being stubborn." "No," Tina said, surprising herself with the truth of it. "It's about facing reality, about starting to reimagine my professional future instead of just hoping to return to the past." The next day, with Ursula as driver and vigilant assistant, Tina made her first visit to her clinic since collapsing there nearly 2 months earlier. The familiar building, a converted Victorian house painted a cheerful blue with white trim, had featured in numerous anxiety dreams during her absence. In those nightmares, she would arrive to find it transformed, unrecognizable, or worse, empty and abandoned. The reality proved both better and more complex than her fears. Business appeared to be continuing relatively smoothly under Lisa's part-time management oversight. The waiting room held its usual complement of patients, many of whom greeted Tina with surprised delight, tempered by the visible shock at her wheelchair. The genuine warmth from her staff, their hugs and tearful welcomes, touched Tina deeply. But beneath their joy at seeing her lurked questions she could read in their careful glances. Would she return? How? When? The uncertainty hung in the air, unspoken but palpable. In the back garden, decorated with pumpkins and autumn wreaths, for the harvest season, Tina found a moment alone, while Ursula engaged Jenny in conversation about scheduling. The garden had been Tina's personal project when she'd purchased the building, transforming a neglected yard into a healing space where patients could practice walking on various surfaces as part of their rehabilitation. Now she eyed the gravel, paths, the stepping stones, the small bridge over a decorative pond, all carefully designed therapeutic elements that now presented insurmountable obstacles to her wheelchair. The garden embodied both her past success and current limitations, making its beauty bittersweet. "We missed you." The voice belonged to Gregory Patterson. Not Dr. Patterson, the neurologist, but Greg, her ex-husband, who stood in the garden doorway looking uncharacteristically uncertain. His timing, as always, proved impeccable in its disruption. "Greg," Tina acknowledged, struggling to keep her voice neutral. Their divorce 6 years earlier had been amicable on paper but emotionally complex, particularly regarding their different visions for family life. Greg's demanding surgical career had left little room for the partnership Tina needed, especially in raising Chrissa. He moved closer, his expression a mixture of clinical assessment and genuine concern. "Lisa told me about your diagnosis. I've been following your treatment protocol through colleagues at the hospital." Of course he had. As one of Ocean View Regional's top orthopedic surgeons, Greg would have access to her medical information through professional channels, perfectly legal, but somehow still feeling like an invasion. "It's an accurate diagnosis," Tina confirmed, resisting the urge to wheel herself backward, away from his evaluation. "The combination therapy shows some promise. It's early yet." Greg nodded, his gaze traveling to her legs with the detached interest of a surgeon viewing a challenging case. "Chen's protocol is aggressive, but has solid outcomes data." Good choice. The clinical discussion created safer territory between them than personal inquiries would have. Tina relaxed marginally, falling into the familiar rhythm of medical dialogue. The inflammatory markers showed slight improvement last week. Range of motion in the left leg has increased approximately 12%. Good, that's good. He hesitated, then added more personally, Chris has been worried. She calls me more often now. The comment sparked a complex mixture of gratitude that their daughter had paternal support and irrational jealousy that Chrissa might be turning to Greg, with concerns she hadn't shared with Tina. She's handling things well, Tina said carefully. My mother's been a significant help. Ursula? Greg's eyebrows rose in genuine surprise. Your mother, who you once described as loving in theory but suffocating in practice? That Ursula? Despite herself, Tina smiled at the accurate quotation of her past complaints. The very same. Turns out apocalyptic circumstances reveal unexpected alliances. Before Greg could respond, Ursula herself appeared in the garden doorway, her posture straightening as she recognized Tina's ex-husband. Their relationship had always been stiffly polite at best, with Ursula never quite forgiving Greg for the divorce, regardless of its mutual nature. Gregory, she acknowledged with a slight nod. You look well. Ursula, he returned with equal formality. I hear you've been taking good care of our patient. Family takes care of family, she replied, the implicit criticism that he was no longer family, hanging in the air between them. Sensing the rising tension, Tina intervened. Greg's been checking on my treatment protocol through his hospital connections. Very medical of him, Ursula observed dryly. To Greg she added, Oh, Chrissa has dinner at your house tomorrow, yes? She mentioned science project she works on with your wife's help. The reference to Greg's second wife, an accomplished research chemist with whom he had 2 young children, wasn't exactly subtle. Tina suppressed a sigh at her mother's protective instincts, which apparently included territorial marking, decades after her own divorce and 6 years after Tina's. Yes, Sarah's been helping her with the experimental design, Greg confirmed, professional enough to ignore the slight edge in Ursula's tone. Chrissa's project on neurodegenerative conditions is impressively ambitious. This was news to Tina. Neurodegenerative conditions? I thought she was doing something on marine ecosystems. An awkward silence followed, as Greg realized he had accidentally revealed something Chrissa apparently hadn't shared with her mother. She changed focus recently, he said carefully. You should ask her about it, it's quite interesting. Before Tina could press for details, Lisa appeared at the door, providing a welcome interruption. Sorry to barge in, but Mr. Anderson just arrived for his father's appointment, and he's asking for you, Tina. The Anderson situation required immediate attention, forcing Tina to set aside the questions about Chris's project. With Ursula's assistance, she navigated back inside to find William Anderson, a weathered fisherman in his 70s, waiting impatiently in the reception area. There she is, he exclaimed upon seeing Tina, his booming voice carrying through. The waiting room. Told you she wasn't too sick to help me get back on my boat. His son Brian, the family business's current manager, looked embarrassed by his father's volume, but equally relieved to see Tina. We didn't want to pressure you, but Dad insists nobody else understands his particular issues. The diplomatic handling of a difficult client was familiar territory for Tina, who smoothly directed them to a consultation room rather than a treatment area. Mr. Anderson, I'm thrilled to see your progress. While I can't personally demonstrate techniques yet, I'd be happy to consult on your case and direct my excellent staff on adjustments to your program. For the next 30 minutes, Tina immersed herself in the familiar role of clinical director, reviewing Anderson's file, observing his current mobility, and making detailed recommendations to the staff therapist who would continue his hands-on treatment. The mental engagement felt like drinking water after a long thirst. Her professional identity temporarily restored despite her physical limitations. When the Andersons finally left, satisfied with the compromise arrangement, Lisa lingered in the consultation room, her expression thoughtful. "You know, this could work," she said. "Not as a temporary solution, but as a sustainable model. You providing the expert assessment and treatment design, the staff handling the physical implementation." The suggestion crystallized something that had been forming in Tina's mind throughout the visit. Not a return to her former role, but an evolution into something new that honored both her expertise and her changed reality. It would require restructuring, Tina mused, already mentally calculating the adjustments needed. Different scheduling, clear communication protocols, possibly some technology upgrades for remote consultation capabilities. All doable, Lisa confirmed. The real question is this what you want, or would it feel like settling for less? The question struck at the heart of Tina's struggle these past months. Would adapting her practice to accommodate her disability feel like defeat, or could it represent a different kind of victory, one measured not by returning to her previous capabilities, but by creating something new from changed circumstances? As they prepared to leave the clinic, Tina found herself pausing in the physical therapy room where she had collapsed that fateful day. The space looked smaller somehow, the equipment simultaneously familiar and estranged, like meeting a childhood friend after decades apart. "You are thinking too loud," Ursula observed, coming to stand beside Tina's wheelchair. "I hear gears turning from across room." Tina smiled faintly, just realizing that I've been so focused on getting back what I lost that I haven't considered what I might build instead. Ursula nodded, understanding immediately. Sometimes when storm knocks down house, you build better house in new place. Not same as old house, maybe better in different ways. The simple wisdom of this perspective resonated deeply with Tina. Perhaps her mother's practical approach to life's challenges, so often at odds with Tina's more emotional processing, offered exactly the framework she needed now. As they drove home through Ocean View's main street, decorated for the upcoming Harvest Festival, Tina made a decision. "I want to go to the festival this weekend." Ursula glanced over, clearly surprised by this announcement. "You sure? Many people." Questions, stares at town hall. "I'm sure," Tina confirmed, a new determination settling in her chest. "I've attended the Harvest Festival every year of my life. I've danced the traditional Portuguese folklorico that the first immigrants brought to this town, including your parents. I'm not missing it, even if I can't dance this year." The annual Harvest Festival represented the heart of Ocean View's cultural identity, a celebration that honored both the town's Portuguese fishing heritage and its contemporary coastal community. For generations, families had gathered for music, traditional food, crafts, and most importantly, the folk dances performed in the town square. Tina had learned these dances as a child at her mother's insistence, initially resisting what she'd perceived as an embarrassing connection to old-world traditions. By adolescence, however, she had come to appreciate their beauty and the connection they provided to her heritage. As an adult, she'd taught them to Crissa, creating a bridge across 3 generations of Pereira women. The thought of attending as a spectator rather than a participant created a bittersweet ache, but Tina recognized the importance of being present, of showing herself and the community that her identity extended beyond her physical capacity to dance. That evening, as they shared this plan with Crissa over dinner, her daughter surprised them both with her response. "Actually, I was going to talk to you about the festival," she said, setting down her fork with uncharacteristic seriousness. "I've been working on something, for a school project, but also for us." Greg's earlier mention of Chris's Change Science project surfaced in Tina's mind. Something related to neurodegenerative conditions. Chris's eyes widened slightly. "How did you—" "Oh, Dad told you?" "Accidentally," Tina assured her. He mentioned you were working with Sarah on the experimental design, but not what exactly you're doing. Chrissa hesitated, suddenly looking younger and more vulnerable. I wanted it to be a surprise, for the festival. She took a deep breath, then continued. I've been researching adaptive movement techniques for people with mobility challenges, specifically how traditional dance forms can be modified without losing their cultural essence. The explanation hung in the air, its implications slowly, dawning on Tina. You're adapting the folklorico for wheelchair performance. Chrissa nodded, a mixture of pride and uncertainty in her expression. With Grandma's help for the traditional elements and Sarah's input on the biomechanics, it's technically a science project about adaptive movement patterns. But really, she swallowed, emotion evident in her voice. Really, it's about us, still, being able to dance together. Tears sprang to Tina's eyes, the gesture's profound meaning hitting her with unexpected force. Her daughter, who had rolled her eyes at Portuguese traditions throughout childhood, who had complained about dance practice every year, had created a way for them to maintain this connection despite Tina's changed mobility. Show me, Tina whispered, not trusting her voice for more. For the next half hour, Chrissa demonstrated the adapted movements she had designed, upper body choreography that captured the essence of the traditional steps while accommodating a seated position. She had video recorded Ursula performing. The original dance analyzed the key movements and translated them into a parallel form that maintained the dance's cultural integrity while creating new possibilities. Most surprising was the revelation that Ursula had been practicing these adapted movements herself, learning to perform them alongside the traditional steps so that 3 generations of Pereira women could dance together at the festival, each in their own way, but united in the shared cultural expression. I didn't want to get your hopes up if it didn't work, Ursula explained, uncharacteristically hesitant. But Chrissa, she is so clever with this design. The dance, it tells same story, even with different movements. The project represented far more than a scientific exercise or cultural preservation. It embodied acceptance without resignation, acknowledgement of changed reality without surrender to limitation. In its thoughtful adaptation, Tina recognized the same principle she was beginning to apply to her professional future. It's perfect, she said simply, reaching for both her mother's and daughter's hands. Absolutely perfect. The morning of the Harvest Festival dawned clear and crisp, autumn sunlight gilding Ocean View's coastal landscape. From her bedroom window, Tina could see neighbors in traditional Portuguese costumes making their way toward the town center, carrying baskets of food and decorations for the communal celebration. You ready? Ursula asked from the doorway, resplendent, in her own costume, a black skirt with colorful embroidery, crisp white blouse, and red shawl that had belonged to her mother before her. At 69, with silver-streaked hair arranged in a traditional crown of braids, she embodied the dignity of her heritage. Almost, Tina replied, fidgeting with the costume elements they had modified to work with her seated position. Is Chrissa ready? Finishing her hair, that girl always last minute. Ursula's complaint carried no real annoyance, just the fond exasperation of a grandmother who secretly delighted in her granddaughter's youthful ways. As they made final preparations, Tina felt the familiar pre-performance nervousness she had, experienced before every festival since childhood. But this year, additional anxiety layered atop tradition. This would be her first major public appearance since her diagnosis, her most visible acknowledgement of her changed reality. People will stare, she said quietly, voicing the fear to her mother. They'll whisper, they'll feel sorry for me. Ursula finished pinning a traditional flower in Tina's hair before responding. Yes, she agreed with characteristic bluntness. "Some will stare, some will whisper. This is what people do. The question is, does their staring change who you are?" Put so simply, the answer became clear. "No, it doesn't." "Then let them stare," Ursula concluded with a decisive nod. "While they stare, we dance." When they arrived at the town square, the festival was already in full swing. Colourful banners hung between historic buildings, food stalls offered traditional Portuguese dishes alongside contemporary fare, and the central bandstand featured local musicians playing a mixture of traditional and modern pieces. Tina felt the weight of eyes turning toward her as Ursula pushed her wheelchair through the crowd. Neighbours, patients, friends registering her condition with expressions ranging from sympathy to discomfort to well-intentioned concern. She had anticipated this attention, but underestimated how exposed it would make her feel, how vulnerable to public evaluation of her changed body. Before the discomfort could overwhelm her, Lisa appeared at her side, squeezing her shoulder in greeting. "About time you showed up. The committee's been arguing about judging the sweet bread contest, and we need someone with actual Portuguese heritage to settle it." The normal interaction, treating Tina as a valued community member rather than an object of pity, provided exactly the grounding she needed. Soon she found herself surrounded by friends, engaged in conversations about everything from clinic business to town politics to Chris's college applications. As afternoon shifted toward evening, the traditional dance performances began. Younger children performed first, stumbling adorably through simplified versions of the centuries-old steps. Watching them, Tina felt the familiar annual surge of cultural continuity. The knowledge that these dances had travelled across oceans and generations to arrive at this New England coastal town. "We're after the middle school group," Chrissa whispered, appearing beside Tina's wheelchair in her own traditional costume, looking suddenly grown up with her hair arranged in the same braided crown as her grandmother's. "Are you nervous?" "Terrified," Tina admitted, reaching for her daughter's hand. "But in a good way, I think." When the announcer called for the special presentation by 3 generations of the Pereira family, a hush fell over the crowd. Tina wheeled herself to the performance area, flanked by Ursula and Chrissa, acutely aware of the curiosity and uncertainty in the watching eyes. The traditional music began, the distinctive rhythm of guitar and accordion creating the foundation for the dance that had originated in the Azores Islands centuries earlier. As they had practiced, Ursula and Chrissa began with the traditional foot patterns, while Tina initiated the adapted upper body movements they had developed together. For the first minute, Tina remained acutely self-conscious, monitoring the crowd's reaction from her peripheral vision. But gradually, as the familiar music flowed through her, a transformation occurred. The movements, different yet connected to the steps she had performed since childhood, carried their own integrity. Her body, changed but not defeated, found new ways to express the cultural story embedded in the dance. Midway through the performance, the 3 women linked hands for a circular pattern. As they turned together, Ursula and Chrissa stepping, Tina wheeling, Tina caught sight of her reflection in a shop window across the square. The image struck her with unexpected force. 3 women moving in harmony despite their differences, each adaptation creating not a diminishment of tradition, but an expansion of its possibilities. As the final notes of music faded, a moment of silence hung in the air, that breathless pause before audience response that every performer knows. Then, from the back of the crowd, someone began to clap. Others joined, the applause building, until it was accompanied by cheers and the traditional Portuguese calls of "Viva!" The celebration continued long into the evening, with Tina finding herself surrounded by townspeople offering genuine praise for the performance. What touched her most weren't the comments about bravery or inspiration, well meant but ultimately condescending, but rather the technical appreciation for how they had honored the tradition while creating something new. The hand movements were captured the essence perfectly. Mrs. Silva, the town's oldest Portuguese immigrant, told her with tears in her eyes. My grandmother would have said the spirit of the dance lives in the heart, not the feet. As the festival wound down, Tina found herself unexpectedly content, watching Chrissa laugh with friends while helping dismantle decorations. Ursula sat nearby, deep in conversation with other elders of the Portuguese community, her hands animated as she lightly recounted stories of festivals from her youth. That was something special. The voice belonged to Greg, who appeared beside Tina's wheelchair, with 2 cups of traditional spice cider. Chrissa showed me some of the practice videos, but seeing it live, he shook his head, genuine admiration in his expression. That kid of ours is extraordinary. She is, Tina agreed, accepting the cider. The phrase, that kid of ours, created a momentary bridge between them, a reminder that whatever had broken in their marriage, they had created something lasting and valuable together. Though I suspect your wife's scientific input was crucial to the biomechanics. Greg smiled, acknowledging Sarah's contribution. The science gave it structure, but the heart of it was pure Pereira women. Stubborn, creative adaptation in the face of impossible odds. He raised his cup slightly. Some things never change. The observation, meant as a compliment, crystallized something important for Tina. Perhaps what defined her wasn't the ability to stand or walk or demonstrate therapeutic techniques, but rather this core quality that Greg had recognized, the capacity to adapt, to find new paths when old ones closed. It was a trait she shared with her mother, and now saw blossoming in her daughter. As they made their way home that night, the 3 generations of Pereira women traveled in comfortable silence, each processing the evening in her own way. When they reached the house, Ursula surprised both Tina and Chrissa by pulling a bottle of port wine from a cabinet where it had apparently been hidden. Special occasion, she explained, pouring 3 small glasses. In Portugal, when young woman dances her first festival as adult, family celebrates with port. Mom, Tina protested mildly. Chrissa's 17. The drinking age here is 21. Ursula waved away this legalistic concern. Is ceremonial sip, not college party. Tradition is older than American laws. Chrissa accepted her glass with barely concealed delight at being included in this adult ritual. To the Pereira women, she proposed, raising her glass with surprising grace. To adaptation without surrender, Tina added, the phrase encapsulating what she had learned through these difficult months. To family, Ursula concluded simply, completing the toast. As they touched glasses, Tina felt a profound sense of connection across generations, the kind that transcended physical ability, that existed in shared values and mutual support. For the first time since her diagnosis, she felt truly hopeful, not for complete recovery, which might never come, but for a meaningful life within whatever parameters her condition established. Have you ever known someone who had to completely reimagine their life due to unexpected physical limitations? If you have, please share your thoughts in the comments. The following week brought a significant milestone: Tina's first full day back at the clinic in a professional capacity. Though not yet physically treating patients, she settled into her newly defined role as clinical director and diagnostic specialist, assessing cases, designing treatment plans, and supervising the therapists who implemented them. The arrangement required adjustments from everyone. Staff who had previously taken direction through demonstration now received detailed verbal and written protocols. Patients accustomed to Tina's hands-on approach needed to adapt to her more consultative role. The physical space itself demanded modifications to accommodate her wheelchair. Yet for all these challenges, Tina found unexpected satisfaction in This professional evolution, freed from the physical demands of demonstration, she could focus more deeply on the diagnostic puzzles that had always fascinated her. Her perspective as someone experiencing mobility challenges herself added a dimension of empathy and practical insight that enhanced her clinical reasoning. "You're different with the patients now," Lisa observed during a break between consultations. "More present somehow." Tina considered this assessment. "Before, I was always partly focused on what I was doing physically, the correct hand placement, the proper demonstration technique. Now I just listen completely." This shift represented a broader transformation occurring within Tina, a moving away from doing toward being, from demonstrating toward witnessing. It wasn't a change she would have chosen, but having been forced into it, she discovered valuable aspects to this new approach to both her profession and her life. At home, similar evolutions continued. Ursula remained a constant presence, but the nature of her assistance subtly changed as Tina gained confidence in navigating her condition. Rather than doing things for Tina, Ursula increasingly focused on creating conditions that enabled Tina to do things for herself, modifying the home environment, researching adaptive equipment, and perhaps most significantly, teaching Tina the traditional healing practices that had been passed down through generations of Portuguese women. "The herbs must be crushed just so," Ursula instructed one evening, guiding Tina's hands through the preparation of a poultice used for joint inflammation. "Not too fine, not too coarse. Feel the texture." These lessons contained more than medicinal knowledge. They represented a transmission of cultural heritage that Tina had resisted in her youth, too busy assimilating to American ways to appreciate her mother's old-world wisdom. Now, as her hands worked alongside Ursula's, she recognized the value in these traditions, not as alternatives to modern medicine, but as complementary practices that addressed both body and spirit. Chrissa absorbed these lessons as well, displaying surprising interest in the traditions she had previously dismissed as embarrassingly old-fashioned. The three women often worked together in the kitchen, Ursula directing while Tina and Chrissa prepared remedies that combined elements from both their Portuguese heritage and contemporary nutritional science. "We should document these," Chrissa suggested one weekend as they bottled a particularly effective anti-inflammatory tincture. Formally record the recipes and the science behind why they work." "For your school project?" Tina asked, intrigued by her daughter's enthusiasm. "Maybe something bigger," Chrissa replied, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Something that connects traditional knowledge with modern understanding. Something that could help other people with conditions like yours." The idea took root, growing alongside Tina's physical improvement. By early December, nearly 3 months into her treatment protocol, Dr. Chen confirmed what Tina had cautiously begun to believe. The combination therapy was working. The progression of her condition had not only halted, but shown modest reversal. In some areas, while she wouldn't regain complete function, the prognosis for maintained mobility, with assistance, was increasingly positive. "The inflammatory markers are significantly decreased," Dr. Chen noted during their monthly video consultation. "And your physical therapist reports consistent improvement in both strength and range of motion. Whatever you're doing beyond the prescribed protocol seems to be enhancing the effects." Tina glanced at Ursula, who sat quietly knitting in the corner of the room, pretending not to listen while absorbing every word. "We've integrated some traditional anti-inflammatory approaches. Nothing that would interfere with the medication." Dr. Chen's interest was immediately piqued. "Nutritional, herbal, I'd love to hear more about your integrated approach." There's growing research interest in complementary therapies for neurodegenerative conditions. This conversation sparked an idea that began to transform how Tina envisioned her professional future. Rather than simply adapting her existing practice To accommodate her disability, perhaps she could evolve it into something new, a specialized center that integrated conventional physical therapy with traditional healing practices, particularly for patients with chronic or degenerative conditions. That evening, she shared this emerging vision with Ursula and Chrissa over dinner, watching their reactions carefully. It would mean significant changes to the practice, new certifications, different equipment, additional staff with specialized training. Also means purpose that uses all of who you are now, Ursula observed with characteristic directness. Not just who you were before. Chris's eyes brightened with excitement. It connects perfectly with my project. I could help design the educational materials on how traditional and modern approaches work together. Maybe even build a website explaining the science behind the traditional remedies. The enthusiasm from both generations bolstered Tina's confidence in this new direction. Over the following weeks, she began researching certification requirements, consulting with colleagues in complementary medicine, and sketching preliminary business plans for transforming her conventional physical therapy practice into an integrated wellness center. This professional reinvention paralleled the changes occurring in her family dynamic. As Christmas approached, bringing with it the 4th month of Ursula's temporary stay, the three women faced an unspoken question about permanent living arrangements. The small house that had initially felt crowded with Ursula's addition now seemed incomplete without her presence. Yet pride and independence remained powerful forces for both mother and daughter. Neither could quite find the words to address the obvious solution, that Ursula's continued presence benefited them all, not just Tina's medical needs. The resolution came through Chrissa, who announced one evening that she had received early acceptance to her top-choice university, a prestigious program just 30 minutes from Ocean View. I got a partial scholarship, she explained, her expression a mixture of pride and concern. But the remaining costs are still significant. I was thinking, if I lived at home instead of the dorms. Of course you'll stay here, Tina assured her immediately. We'll make it work financially. That's the thing, Chrissa continued hesitantly. The basement renovation we talked about last year, turning it into a proper bedroom and study space. Could we still do that? With everything that's happened? The basement conversion had been planned before Tina's diagnosis, a project to give Chrissa more independence while remaining at home. Financial and practical constraints had shelved those plans indefinitely. Contractors cost too much, Ursula interjected before Tina could respond, and work never done right anyway. If we do ourselves, with help from friends, costs half as much. Tina raised an eyebrow at her mother's use of we, the first acknowledgement that Ursula might be considering a longer-term arrangement. You're volunteering to manage a construction project, Mom? Why not? Your father built houses his whole life. I watched, I learned. Between us, we figure out. The proposal launched a conversation that extended far beyond basement renovations, finally addressing the future living situation that had remained diplomatically unmentioned. By evening's end, a new arrangement had emerged. Ursula would move permanently into the small guest room, Chrissa would claim the renovated basement, and together they would create a multi-generational household that balanced independence with mutual support. We must be clear, Ursula insisted as they finalized these plans. I am not moving in as nurse or caretaker only. I am family member with own life, own friends, own activities. And I'm not accepting help out of inability to manage alone, Tina countered, equally determined to establish healthy boundaries. This is a choice about how we want to live, not a necessity forced by my condition. Chrissa observed this negotiation with amused affection. You two are so alike, it's scary. Both stubborn about being independent while simultaneously planning how to live together. The observation struck both older women into momentary silence, each recognizing the truth in Chris's assessment. Their lifelong tension had always centered on this paradox, their shared trait of fierce independence that simultaneously connected and divided them. As Christmas Eve arrived, bringing with it Ocean View's traditional celebration, the Pereira household had transformed both physically and emotionally. Adaptive equipment now blended seamlessly into the decor. Ursula's Portuguese influences merged with Tina's more contemporary style, and Chris's emerging adult identity added its own distinctive elements to their shared space. The night held particular significance in Portuguese tradition, with the Christmas Eve feast considered more important than Christmas Day itself. Ursula had spent days preparing traditional dishes, salt cod, roast potatoes, various vegetable preparations, and sweet rice pudding for dessert. The dining table groaned under the weight of this cultural bounty as friends began to arrive for the celebration. Lisa came with her husband and children. Several staff members from the clinic appeared with their families. Greg stopped by briefly, with a gift for Chrissa, maintaining the cordial co-parenting relationship he and Tina had established. Even some of Ursula's friends from the Portuguese Cultural Center joined the gathering, bringing additional traditional dishes and filling the house with a mixture of English and Portuguese conversations. As Tina surveyed the crowded living room, from her position near the fireplace, she felt a profound sense of community. These people had witnessed her at her most vulnerable, had adjusted their expectations and interactions as her condition evolved, and had ultimately followed her lead in focusing on capabilities rather than limitations. "Your house has good energy. Now," Mrs. Silver commented, settling beside Tina with a plate of food. "3 generations of strong women under one roof, very traditional Portuguese arrangement." Tina smiled at the observation. "We've gone full circle, it seems. My mother left Portugal to start a new life in America, and now we're creating a household that looks remarkably like what she left behind." "But with American innovations?" Mrs. Silver noted, gesturing toward the adaptive equipment that enabled Tina's independence. "The best of both worlds, perhaps." The phrase captured something essential about the transformation Tina had undergone, not just physically, but philosophically. She had moved from resistance to integration, from seeing her mother's traditional ways and her own modern approach as oppositional forces to recognizing them as complementary strengths. Later that evening, after guests had departed and Chrissa had gone to bed, Tina found Ursula in the kitchen, meticulously packaging leftovers, with the precision of someone who had known true scarcity. "Thank you," Tina said simply, the words encompassing far more than appreciation for the evening's meal. Ursula looked up, her expression softening from concentration to understanding. "You would do same for me," she replied with equal simplicity. "You would do same for anyone you love." The acknowledgement of love, so rarely stated explicitly between them, created a moment of unusual vulnerability. Tina wheeled closer to where her mother stood. "When I was first diagnosed," she admitted quietly, "one of my biggest fears was becoming like the patients I've treated, people whose lives became defined by their conditions, who lost their sense of self to their diagnosis." Ursula nodded, her hands continuing their methodical work while her attention remained focused on her daughter. "This is why you fought help so hard at beginning." "Yes. I thought accepting assistance meant surrendering to the disease. I thought depending on others, especially you, meant failing somehow." Tina paused, finding the right words for this important truth. "What I've learned instead is that independence isn't about doing everything alone. It's about having the agency to choose interdependence when it makes sense." "This is wisdom," Ursula said approvingly. "Took me many more years to learn same lesson." "I had a good teacher," Tina replied with a small smile. Scary confident, but good. Ursula laughed at the reference to Chris's description, the sound warm in the quiet kitchen. We are both teachers for each other now. Different lessons, same classroom. As they finished cleaning together, Ursula washing while Tina dried and stored the dishes she could reach from her wheelchair, Tina reflected on the journey they had traveled over these past months. The physical challenges remained significant. The medical prognosis, while improved, still carried uncertainty. Each day brought moments of frustration with her body's limitations. Yet alongside these difficulties had emerged unexpected gifts, a deeper relationship with her mother, a more mature connection with her daughter, a professional evolution that might ultimately serve her patients better than her previous approach. Most significantly, she had developed a more nuanced understanding of strength, one that included vulnerability, adaptability, and the courage to accept help without surrendering agency. When the last dish was put away, Ursula yawned, the long day of cooking and hosting finally catching up with her. Tomorrow we rest, she declared. No exercises, no treatments, just family day. Sounds perfect, Tina agreed, suddenly aware of her own exhaustion. Merry Christmas, Mom. Feliz Natal, filha, Ursula returned, using both the Portuguese greeting and the endearment that had once embarrassed Tina but now felt like a verbal embrace. As they moved toward their respective bedrooms, Ursula to the guest room that now bore her personal touches, Tina to her adapted space designed for maximum independence. Tina felt a serenity that had seemed impossible in those first desperate days after her diagnosis. Her condition had permanently altered her body, but the essence of who she was remained intact, transformed rather than diminished by the journey through vulnerability. In accepting help, she had discovered new dimensions of strength. In relinquishing certain capabilities, she had developed others. In facing limitation, she had found unexpected freedom. The path ahead still held challenges. Her treatment would continue indefinitely. Some physical capabilities might never return. The integrated wellness center she envisioned would require enormous effort to establish. The multi-generational household they were creating would demand ongoing negotiation and compromise. Yet as Tina prepared for sleep that Christmas Eve, she felt equipped for whatever came next. Not because she could handle everything alone, she couldn't, and now understood she was never meant to, but because she had learned perhaps the most important lesson of her life. True strength wasn't found in independence, but in connection. Not in self-sufficiency, but in the courage to be vulnerable. Not in denying limitations, but in adapting to them with creativity and grace. Outside her window, snow had begun to fall, transforming Ocean View's familiar landscape into something new yet recognizable, different but no less beautiful for the change. Tomorrow would bring another day of the life she hadn't chosen, but was now deliberately shaping. With her mother's practical wisdom, her daughter's innovative spirit, and her own hard-won resilience, they would continue writing this unexpected story together. 3 generations of women finding their way, not despite their differences, but because of them. The journey that had begun with her collapse at the clinic would never truly end. There would be no miraculous return to her previous self. But perhaps that woman, the fiercely independent physiotherapist who had believed strength meant never needing help, had been in need of transformation all along. Perhaps this forced surrender to vulnerability had actually been a doorway to a more authentic, more connected way of being. As sleep began to claim her, Tina's final thought was not of what she had lost, but of what she had found. The knowledge that healing comes in many forms, that strength wears many faces, and that sometimes the greatest journeys occur not when we're in motion, but when we're forced to be still. The coming year would bring its own challenges and victories, setbacks and breakthroughs. But whatever came, the Pereira women would face it as they had faced everything else, together but independent, similar but distinct, bound by blood and choice and the unspoken understanding that sometimes life's most painful limitations give rise to its most profound possibilities. In the quiet darkness of Christmas Eve, with her mother's steady breathing audible through the thin wall between their rooms and her daughter's occasional movements heard from the temporary basement bedroom below, Tina Pereira slept peacefully, surrounded by the family that had become not just her support system, but her partners in reimagining what strength, healing, and wholeness could mean. Will you stay with me until the end of this particularly challenging but ultimately transformative chapter of their lives? The new year arrived with renewed purpose. January brought the beginning of construction on Chris's basement apartment, with Ursula surprisingly adept at coordinating the project. Her decades of observation during her late husband's construction career translated into practical knowledge that impressed even the professional contractors they hired for the specialized work. "Your mother is something else," commented Marco, the electrical contractor who had initially spoken to Tina as if Ursula weren't present, only to rapidly reassess when she pointed out a wiring issue he had overlooked. "My grandmother was like her. Didn't say much until she needed to, but when she spoke, everyone listened." Tina watched with amusement as her mother directed the renovation with the same precision she had once supervised emergency room procedures. "She's always been a force of nature. I just didn't always appreciate the wisdom behind the directness." As work progressed on the house, parallel transformations continued in Tina's professional life. With Lisa's partnership, she began the process of reimagining her physical therapy practice as an integrated wellness center. The concept gained unexpected momentum when Dr. Chen expressed interest in establishing a satellite research partnership to study their combined traditional-conventional approach to treating neurodegenerative conditions. "Your timing is excellent," Dr. Chen explained during a video consultation. "There's growing interest in the medical community about integrative approaches, particularly for conditions that don't respond completely to conventional treatments alone." This professional evolution created new energy and purpose that carried Tina through the continued challenges of her treatment regimen. Though the most severe side effects had diminished somewhat as her body adjusted to the medications, she still experienced difficult days when fatigue or pain limited her activities. On those days, the household adapted, Ursula taking on more physical tasks, Chrissa handling errands that Tina would normally manage. "I've been thinking," Chrissa said one evening as they reviewed college financial paperwork together. "What if my required freshman humanities course could be an independent study related to the wellness center? Something about cross-cultural healing traditions?" "That's actually brilliant," Tina replied, impressed by her daughter's strategic thinking. "It would allow you to contribute to the center while fulfilling your academic requirements." These conversations about Chris's education carried different weight now that college acceptance had transformed theoretical futures into concrete plans. While proud of her daughter's achievements, Tina sometimes felt a wistful awareness of time passing too quickly, the childhood she had hoped to savor suddenly accelerating toward its conclusion. "She will still need you," Ursula observed one afternoon, noticing Tina's pensive expression as they watched Chrissa chatting animatedly on the phone with future classmates. "Just differently." "I know," Tina acknowledged. "It's just happening." "Alongside so many other changes," Ursula nodded, understanding the layered transitions her daughter faced. "Some losses make space for new things. Some changes hurt while happening but leave you stronger after." The simple wisdom resonated with Tina's experience of both motherhood and her condition. Each represented a journey of constant adaptation, of learning to hold on and let go in the proper measures and moments. February brought Valentine's Day and an unexpected invitation from Greg. Sarah and I would like to host a dinner for Chrissa to celebrate her scholarship, he explained over the phone. We were hoping you might join us, all three of you, if your mother would like to come. The invitation represented a significant gesture toward blending their separated family units. In the years since their divorce, Tina and Greg had maintained cordial co-parenting relations, but had rarely socialized together, particularly not with Greg's second wife present. That's very thoughtful, Tina replied, genuinely touched by the effort toward harmony. I'll need to check with Mum, but I think we'd all like that. When she relayed the invitation to Ursula, her mother's response was characteristically direct. You worry I will be rude to ex-husband and new wife? The thought had crossed my mind, Tina admitted with a small smile. You've never been his biggest fan. Ursula sniffed dismissively. That was before. Different time now. He is still Chris's father, still part of family, just different arrangement. She paused, then added with surprising insight, maybe without marriage between you, easier to see good things about him. The dinner proved surprisingly enjoyable. Greg and Sarah had created a warm celebration of Chris's achievements, complete with Portuguese dishes they had researched to honor her heritage. While initially reserved, Ursula gradually relaxed as Sarah engaged her in genuine conversation about traditional cooking techniques. Your mother is fascinating, Sarah commented to Tina as they cleared dishes together. The depth of her knowledge about herbal properties is remarkable. I'd love to discuss potential research applications sometime. This unexpected connection between Greg's scientific second wife and Ursula's traditional wisdom represented another bridge forming between worlds that Tina had always perceived as separate and sometimes opposing. The evening left her reflecting on how many of her life's conflicts had perhaps been unnecessary divisions, maintained more by assumption than actual incompatibility. March arrived with the formal launch of Tina's reimagined practice. The Ocean View Integrated Wellness Center opened with modest ceremony but significant community interest. Local press covered the unique approach combining Tina's physiotherapy expertise with Ursula's traditional Portuguese healing knowledge, highlighting the mother-daughter partnership that had emerged from personal health challenges. We're not acclaiming miracles, Tina explained carefully to the local reporter, conscious of maintaining medical credibility. We're offering complementary approaches that support conventional treatment while addressing aspects of wellness that modern medicine sometimes overlooks. The article generated unexpected attention, bringing inquiries from patients throughout the region seeking alternatives for chronic conditions that hadn't responded adequately to conventional treatments alone. Within weeks, the center's schedule was fully booked, necessitating additional staff and expanded hours. This professional success coincided with continued improvements in Tina's physical condition. By early spring, she had progressed from wheelchair to walker for shorter distances within the home and clinic. Though she still required the chair for longer periods or distances, the increased mobility represented significant progress that Dr. Chen described as exceeding typical response patterns. Whatever you're doing beyond the protocol, keep doing it, the specialist advised during their monthly consultation. Your inflammatory markers continue to decrease at rates faster than most patients on this treatment regimen. Tina credited the improvement to the integrated approach they had developed, the combination of conventional medications, traditional anti-inflammatory remedies, consistent physical therapy, and perhaps most significantly, the reduced stress that came with acceptance rather than resistance to her changed reality. April brought completion of Chris's basement apartment, a milestone the family celebrated with a small housewarming gathering. The space reflected Chris's emerging adult identity while incorporating subtle adaptive features that would allow Tina to visit comfortably. Wider doorways, a small ramp disguised as a decorative entry, grab bars designed as aesthetic elements rather than obvious mobility aids. "You can come down any time," Chrissa assured her mother, "but maybe text first when I'm home from college on weekends." The request for privacy came with a teasing smile that acknowledged her transition from child to young adult. As spring warmed towards summer, the household settled into rhythms that accommodated each woman's needs and contributions. Ursula tended the garden, now expanded to include medicinal herbs used in the wellness center's treatments. Chrissa divided her time between final high school responsibilities and contributing to the center's educational materials. Tina balanced clinical work with ongoing treatment, each day bringing small victories alongside continued challenges. Their multi-generational arrangement wasn't without tensions. Ursula's early morning activities sometimes disturbed Tina's sleep, already compromised by her condition. Chris's teenage habits, clothes left in shared spaces, dishes abandoned in the sink, tested Ursula's orderly nature. Tina's occasional frustration with her physical limitations created days of sharp responses and momentary despair that affected them all. Yet these frictions, rather than threatening their connection, somehow deepened it, creating opportunities for honest communication, mutual accommodation, and the kind of genuine intimacy that comes only through navigating difficulty together. "I never thought we'd end up here," Tina admitted to her mother one evening as they sat in the garden, watching fireflies emerge in the summer twilight. "If someone had described this arrangement to me a year ago, I would have said it sounded like my worst nightmare." Ursula chuckled, understanding the complex truth behind this confession. "And now I can't imagine any other way to live," Tina replied honestly. "Not because I need the help, though sometimes I do, but because there's something right about it, like we've found a balance that was always possible but never realized." Ursula nodded, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon where ocean met sky. "In Portugal, my grandmother used to say that the strongest families are like good fishing nets. Each knot is separate but connected to many others. When storm comes, the spaces between allow water to pass through without breaking the whole." The metaphor captured their evolved relationship perfectly. The delicate balance between independence and interconnection, between individual identity and collective support. They had become a human ecosystem, each woman's strengths compensating for the other's limitations, creating a resilience greater than any could have achieved alone. As Chris's high school graduation approached, marking another transition in their shared journey, Tina found herself reflecting on the 18 months that had transformed her life since that fateful collapse in her clinic. The path had been neither straight nor easy. Recovery remained incomplete, with certain physical capabilities permanently altered. Yet when she measured the true distance traveled, it wasn't in steps taken or functions restored, but in wisdom gained and connections deepened. She had learned that strength manifested not just in independence, but in the courage to be vulnerable, that healing came in forms beyond the physical, that adaptation wasn't surrender, but a different kind of victory. Most importantly, she had discovered that identity transcended capability, that who she was extended far beyond what she could physically do. On graduation day, as she watched Chris cross the stage to receive her diploma, Tina felt her mother's hand squeeze her shoulder, gently. In that touch lived a world of understanding, acknowledgement of all they had weathered together and all that still lay ahead. For the journey that had begun in crisis 18 months earlier hadn't reached its destination. It had simply revealed itself as a longer, richer path than any of them had imagined. That evening, as the 3 generations of Pereira women celebrated Chris's achievement with a small gathering of close friends, Tina raised her glass in a toast that encompassed far more than academic accomplishment. to unexpected journeys, she offered, looking at the faces around her. Her mother, whose stubborn care had carried her through the darkest days. Her daughter, whose adaptability inspired her own. The friends and colleagues who had adjusted their expectations without diminishing their connection. And to those who walk beside us, even when the path changes. The sentiment resonated around the table, each person present having played some role in the transformation of not just Tina's life, but the intertwined lives of all three Pereira women. Their story had become one of collective resilience, of family redefined not by conventional structures, but by commitment to showing up for each other through challenge and change. Later, after guests had departed and Chrissa had gone to celebrate further with friends, Tina found her mother sitting on the back porch, gazing up at the stars visible in Ocean View's relatively dark skies. Without speaking, she positioned her wheelchair beside Ursula's chair, their shoulders nearly touching in companionable silence. "Did I ever tell you," Ursula said after several minutes, "about the time my mother lost use of her hands for almost a year?" Tina turned in surprise. "No. What happened?" "Rheumatic fever when I was 14. Her hands seized up, couldn't even hold spoon." Ursula's voice carried the measured cadence of storytelling. "For those months, I became her hands. She directed, I executed. Together we maintained household." The revelation of this family history, never before mentioned despite its obvious parallels to their current situation, stunned Tina. "Why didn't you tell me this when I was first diagnosed?" Ursula shrugged slightly. "Would you have heard it then, or would you have seen it as pressure, as expectation from me?" The question wasn't accusatory, but genuinely curious, and Tina considered it carefully. "Probably the latter," she admitted. "I wouldn't have been ready to see it as shared experience, as connection." Ursula nodded, satisfied with this honest assessment. Stories reveal themselves when listener is ready to hear, not before. "And my mother recovered?" Tina asked, understanding now why Ursula had chosen this moment to share this piece of family history. "Mostly," Ursula replied. "Never again could she do fine needlework that she loved, but she adapted, found new ways to create beauty." She paused, then added, "The year of her hands changing, that was when she taught me to see with my fingers, to feel the herbs, to know them by touch and smell when sight might deceive. This knowledge I now pass to you and Chrissa." The cyclical nature of this transmission struck Tina deeply. How limitation in one generation had created wisdom passed to the next. How challenge became legacy rather than merely loss. Perhaps her own condition would similarly generate insights that would benefit Chrissa in ways yet unrevealed. "Thank you for telling me," Tina said softly, "for waiting until I could hear it as more than just a story about illness." Ursula's hand found hers in the darkness, their fingers interlacing in silent acknowledgement. Together, they sat beneath the vast summer sky, 3 generations of Pereira women, now reduced to 2 in this moment, but connected through time to countless others who had faced limitation, adaptation, and transformation before them. The story that had begun with Tina's collapse, her body betraying her in an instant that divided her life into before and after, had evolved into something far more nuanced than tragedy or triumph. It had become a chronicle of continuous becoming, of identity, not fixed but fluid, of healing that transcended physical restoration to encompass something more profound, the recognition that wholeness existed not in perfection, but in integration. Of limitation with capability, of independence with interconnection, of ending with beginning. As crickets sang in the garden their mother had tended together, Tina Pereira felt something settle within her. Not resignation to her condition, but acceptance of her transformed life in all its complexity. The healer who could no longer Heal herself had discovered instead how to be healed by connection, by purpose, by the courage to remain open to whatever came next. "When I first saw you in that hospital wheelchair," Ursula said suddenly, breaking their comfortable silence, "I was so afraid." The admission, so contrary to the unshakable confidence she had projected, startled Tina. "You never seemed afraid. Not once." "What good would my fear do for you then?" Ursula asked softly, echoing her words from their drive to Boston months earlier. "You needed my strength, not my doubt." "And now?" Tina asked, curious about this rare glimpse into her mother's vulnerability. Ursula smiled, the expression visible even in the dim porch light. "Now we are past needing to pretend. Now we can be afraid together sometimes, strong together other times, more honest this way." The simplicity of this statement belied its profound significance. They had evolved beyond the careful performances of capability and control that had characterized their earlier relationship, beyond the daughter's need to prove independence and the mother's need to demonstrate infallibility. What remained was more authentic. Two women acknowledging both their strength and vulnerability, their connection and separateness. As they sat together beneath the summer stars, their journey continued, not toward some definitive resolution, but along a path of ongoing discovery. The story that had begun with loss had transformed into one of finding, not what was taken, but what had always been waiting to be revealed. "Congratulations, type 9 in the comments so that I know you stayed until the end with me. Thank you for watching, and until tomorrow's story on this same channel."